Hey guys, good to hear from you again.
Hey, Andy, that's not how this meeting
Well,
works.
we had an episode away, and now I've forgotten all the rules. They're gone. So now we're starting anew.
Okay. So let's start from the basics. He's Andy.
Oh, I think Wait, are you Evan?
I am, in fact. I am not Will. I
Nailed
am
it.
Evan.
Nailed it.
Although
First
William
try.
is my middle name, so perhaps to some people, I am Will.
You are the will of Christmas past. Episodes
I'd
past.
rather not get into the metaphysics of the whole thing. But what did we watch this week,
I don't
Anderson?
want to talk about it.
It's a little film called
don't say it.
Joe's Apartment. Which is... Now, normally Andy says the name of the movie, and then I respond with a joke.
A pithy
so let's just
remark.
assume that Andy said the name of the movie.
Joe's
and
Apartment.
I'll say,
There you go. Joe's Apartment. Take it.
which is perhaps the most ill-conceived metaphor for gentrification ever. But welcome to Badwatch.
It was a really bad watch this week, everyone.
Maybe...
To our myriad listeners.
I honestly think this is right up there with Christmas Grace territory.
Yeah, I mean, there was more production value, a lot
Higher
more.
production value and more competent filmmaking.
Actually, someone funneled a lot of money into this movie.
Speaking of which, I have the Wikipedia page open.
Okay.
And fun fact, John Payson, the writer-director, originally had a short film called Joe's Apartment, which aired on MTV as filler in between commercial breaks. It won a Cable ACE award or Cable Ace award, and the smart folks at MTV said, "This is so successful, we're gonna give you $13 million to make this a feature film." And they're clearly thinking of feature film in very loose terms because it's 79 minutes long. They couldn't even stretch this to a solid 90. It's shorter than most children's films, and it feels like a VHS tape they play in Guantanamo Bay.
It is a bumpy ride.
Yeah. Andy and I both recognize that this is prime B-Fest material.
I'm very excited to support B-Fest this year. I want to arrange that with them, and then I want to make everyone sit through this monstrosity.
Yeah. It has very negative reviews. It has like a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was pulled from theaters after only making $4.6 million.
I'm sort of surprised.
I'm
Maybe
surprised
people
it made
got
that
tricked into
much, honestly. There's also a really funny quote from Roger Ebert's review of the film. May he rest in peace. Joe's Apartment would be a very bad comedy even without the Roaches, but it would not be a disgusting one. No, wait, I take that back. Even without the Roaches, we would still have the subplot involving the pink disinfectant urinal cakes.
Yes, yeah, and
So-
the other subplots that
all the
were
other-
sprinkled
the
in
cross-dressing
liberally for no
senator.
reason. Yes, no reason. No, not commented on, not used in any way except for crappy jokes.
And Peppa of Salt and Peppa is in this film.
I mean, I don't think that aided her career at all.
No, this was maybe when Push It was on the outs, and
They needed to push her.
they were like, "Well, we did. Let's talk about sex. So now let's talk about roaches. That seems reasonable."
Please don't, Peppa. Please don't.
So,
And
Joe's
her role
apart-
is so minor too.
it's very minor, which is unfortunate. But so much is unfortunate about this film. We really don't have time for that discussion. Now, Joe, the boy who was Iowa in human form. He arrives in New York City.
Wait. What do you mean Iowa in human form? Are Iowans, do they normally live in a terrible life situation and they don't clean up after themselves?
No, I mean, okay. At the beginning of the film, he's a dough-faced, corn-fed white boy with stars in his eyes and dreams in his heart and a surprising number of belongings for someone who just traveled via Greyhound bus. Then he disembarks from said bus and is robbed.
This starts immediately going just right off the rails. This whole thing.
He is robbed 3 times in rapid succession, all in the same garage, where presumably he was the only rider on this bus.
Less than 15 feet from where he got off the bus.
There's no driver, no other passengers who can see this Iowa man. Iowa man, Florida man's less interesting cousin. He gets off the bus and is quickly robbed
possibly
3 times.
dirtier in this instance.
Yes.
Less interesting, but dirtier.
So, yeah, it's...
Oh, I do need to convey... I'm so excited about this whole B-Fest connection. I do need to convey, I just looked up the history of B-Fest, and Joe's apartment has never been viewed. Something unique to ruin people's lives with.
You know, if this shows at B-Fest and I go to B-Fest, I think, if we do something to introduce it, I will have to fake a severe illness.
Just leave. No one's going to care. Just leave.
Well, your father will definitely be there. And if I'm sitting next to your father, I will have to say, excuse me, I need to go vomit because I know what happens. So, our boy Joe, Iowa Joe.
Well, I just also need to start out so we meet Joe, but before that, there's the intro song.
You're right.
We're introduced to the
Roach chorus.
I have written down the worst, angriest barbershop quartet I ever wanted to squish.
I commented when we were watching that it sounded like the Chipmunks, but when they were smoking weed as teenagers.
It's not. It'd be meth. That's meth. Definitely not. That's not weed.
Their teeth are falling out. Alvin, I said go to rehab.
It was Alvin, go to rehab.
Alvin, you go to rehab. But that's the welcome to Joe's apartment. And there's this whole nauseating scene where the camera is very closely following a cockroach flying over the skyline of New York City, and he's all topsy-turvy because he's a cockroach. They're not known for their flight capabilities. And
thankfully
they're singing this whole song, and later they dance. According to IMDb, the Roach chorus has 6 songs featured in the film. There is the aforementioned Joe's Apartment theme, the later Garbage in the Moonlight, Cat Rodeo, Funky Towel, Sewer Surfin'.
Funky Towel's one of my favorites.
Funky Towel really almost did me in, I'll be honest.
Yeah, we were both groaning as that was occurring.
Just the visuals with that song are so disturbing and gross.
There were several. So this is one of the few times we've gotten together to watch this, dear listeners. And Evan and I, several times, especially during the song and dance portions of this flick, looked at each other and just shuddered.
I honestly, watching this, every time there's another Roach song, you're like, oh, they did more than one of these. Oh, they did more than 2 of these. And it's I feel like John Payson just had a bunch of ideas for songs sung by roaches and tried to wrap like a movie around those songs.
This is a Roach song delivery system, is what this is.
Yeah, now the final song, which has maybe the one genuine laugh for me in the whole film, is called Hold My Feeler. So that's something to look forward to in our discussion.
Okay, so we've discussed, we've got the intro and the triple stick up, and we're
triple stick up.
2 minutes into this movie, and
So Joe arrives. I'm going to try and go through the plot as briefly as possible, because really there's not a whole lot of plot, and it really only arrives in the last 10 minutes. But
yeah, really,
Joe is wandering around New York City, ostensibly homeless and jobless, and possessionless now that he has been robbed 3 times. Also, like, do you think, I'm imagining that the robbers showed up at that parking garage and they had to, like, draw straws for who would get him first and who would get him second?
Well,
Like,
obviously.
There's no way they weren't aware of each other.
This was a guild of thieves that he ran into.
They're like doing thieves' can't, but in the bus.
Yeah. Oh, no, you. No, you. Sick of
I would
boys.
love that. So that's a much more interesting movie to me. God damn it.
We just gotta work together and mine these gems.
But Joe is wandering around the city, and he comes across a man lying on the sidewalk covered in blood. And he kneels down as other people are just walking by because this is New York and forget about it. And he kneels down. He's like, "Mister, are you okay?" And the dude sits up and he stops a stopwatch he was running. And it was like, what, something like 2 days and almost...
2 days, 13 hours, and 6 minutes.
Yeah, and that was how long he'd been lying on the ground waiting for someone to check on him,
Yeah.
apparently, because this gentleman is named correctly and aptly Walter Shit, and he is an artist. But I think maybe the filmmakers...
I'm an artist.
He's maybe the filmmaker's idea of a person who calls themselves an artist without taking a single art class ever. Walter Shit is also the singer-guitarist for his band, Shit.
The aptly named Shit.
Yeah, the aptly named Shit, and eventually Iowa Joe is roped into being their drummer, despite saying, "I don't know how to play the drums," which then sort of ends his relationship with Walter Shit because they're on stage about to perform, and I guess Shit is the kind of band that doesn't rehearse, because the fact that Joe does not know how to play the drums at all is a surprise to everyone.
Band members. Or...
He has not met anyone besides Walter Shit.
Yeah.
And I was in a band for a while, and we rehearsed at least twice a week, more if we had a big show coming up. But I mean, Joe doesn't have a drum set, so I guess none of it makes any sense, you guys. But he's looking for an apartment. Walter Shit takes him under his shitty wing, and they're getting coffee, and they look for all the world like meth heads, which I do think you're right. That's what the Roaches were into.
I mean, definite uppers, all right, something like that.
Yeah, they're all jittery and drinking coffee and all night diners and. But they're walking down the street, and I think East Village, which is portrayed as the shittiest absolute shithole in all of New York. But isn't East Village in Manhattan?
I don't know if like the whole depiction was like New York just like ultra violence, like.
Yeah, there's multiple times like. There's a later scene with Walter and Joe, and they're just casually chatting and walking down the sidewalk, and they're interrupted by 2 men running in front of them, shooting their guns and running off screen, and then they keep walking, only to be interrupted again when 2 cops arrive and stop them and start shooting. It's just like, what? This has never been...
is this some ridiculous commentary or something? It's not even... It's absurdism, but it wasn't like good. It was depressing.
Absurdism at its least tasteful. And also it was really strange in the opening shot to see the Twin Towers in the skyline. And I made the comment to Andy, like, this is so obviously from the 90s because the way New York police officers are portrayed in any media, but especially films now, it had changed so radically after 9/11 because they were all viewed as such heroes. And in this movie, they could not be like any dumber. They're just such shitheads running around shooting all the black people, and they're all white people, of course.
They're not shitheads because that would imply that they're under Walter's organization of shit. So it's not. They're not linked to the artist.
That's true. Shitheads are what the fans of shit call themselves. God, I want a t-shirt that says shithead now, but in the band font. But anyway, I digress. So Walter and Joe are walking down the street. Walter's making fun of Joe because Joe thinks he can find an apartment for like $50 a week or something.
Something ridiculous.
Which, like, honestly, were there even apartments going for that in Iowa in 1996?
I don't know.
It seems...
Yeah, but shit is like, he's like, he want this guy, he's like yelling out, this guy wants a rent-controlled apartment, and then all of New York laughs at Joe.
Yes. The entire city, all at once. Presumably the Roaches are somewhere and they're like, ooh, who's this Joe? Wow. And then we see the lovely Mrs. Grotowski, who is leaving her apartment, but her two predatory landlords are prepared for her departure, and they have strung a tripwire at the top of the staircase, which she quickly tumbles down, all 3 flights, I think. Lands on her...
She rolls... This is so. This is a stairwell that is become infamous in New York. It's probably good that this building ends up burned down because the stairwell was notorious for everyone rolling down it. No one actually walked.
This is the first of many stairwell rolls in Joe's apartment.
5 or 6 occur over the course of this.
Too many. Just like the Roach songs. There are too many.
So they trip her. She rolls down like 3 flights of stairs. And then rolls out almost to the front door, and
just stands up,
dusts herself off. Doesn't accuse anyone of trying to murder her. Walks out the front door, and that is when our hero, I'm sad to say, our hero is walking by with Mr. Shit, and she has a heart attack. And as she has her heart attack, she grips her chest dramatically and tosses her keys into the air, which Joe then catches.
Yes, and now he commits fraud by saying he is the late Mrs. Grotowski's son, and he inherits her rent-controlled apartment. And I like to think that Mrs. Grotowski went out with a heart attack because she was so shocked by Walter Schitt's very awful hair. And it was so offensive and edgy that she just keeled over and died.
She cut herself on its metaphysical edges.
It's really strange. It's like, so his hair, the roots of his hair are like red, but all of the rest of his hair is dyed black, but his hair is grown out like an inch.
Yeah.
And it's often spiked in all directions away from his head.
Like a crazy person mohawk.
Like a crazy person mohawk, and the kind of guy who uses Elmer's glue as hair product. Yeah. But so Joe,
water soluble. It's perfect.
Yeah. Oh my god. Joe, he commits fraud without blinking an eye because, he's Iowa Joe. He can do that sort of thing. And he lives in this apartment. He never cleans out any of Mrs. Grotowski's belongings or garbage.
Correct.
He
opens
just
the fridge,
starts...
it's filled with death, and he closes it and continues on about his day.
Yeah, he opens the fridge, sees all the rotting food, closes the fridge, and then he's like, cool, I live here now. And
he doesn't get rid of any furniture, any of her bras, any of her clothes.
No, he decorates by putting all of his garbage on top of Mrs. Grotowski's garbage.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to Joe...
Well, I think is that when the Roach whispering starts in, and they're like, who's this guy? He's great. He's my favorite. he's keeping us garbage. He's the best.
This guy's our king, Joe. Oh man. But they are very invested in Joe's welfare because he is a complete and utter slob.
Yeah, that's when we find out that the Roaches are sentient, which is this is the darkest timeline at this point.
Yes.
The Roaches are sentient, and they love show tunes and want to sing more.
I would love it if, like, a line in Terminator or one of the Terminator movies had been, I need to go back in time, not only to protect Sarah Connor, but also to make sure no one ever makes Joe's apartment. Because this is for sure the darkest timeline. But
the T-1000s are guaranteed if that creator, that scientist, sees Joe's apartment.
That's how cockroaches are going to survive the nuclear holocaust. Is they're the T-1000's lone weakness is cockroaches. Because they get in there and then they can pilot the thing with their 6 appendages.
With their singing harmonics.
But, oh God, I was going to say something. Oh, the roaches. So they're very gross CGI roaches for most of the time. And when the CGI was too expensive, they are shown...
I love/hated this.
They are shown with, like, a pair of Joe's filthy, disgusting underwear on the floor.
Vibrating.
Moving like it's a hand puppet. And talking.
Or, like, the teeth inside a jar of liquid, Mrs. Gronkowski's, whatever her name was, teeth inside the jar. Those were talking because I guess the roaches breathe whatever you store dentures in. It was... everything talked in the entire apartment.
And frankly, that's a plot hole because she was leaving the apartment to go shopping, and I have a hard time believing the late Mrs. Grotowski would go shopping without wearing her dentures. It just seems unreasonable to me.
It was her backup pair.
Yes. Now...
Nailed it. Fixed plot hole fixed.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, or maybe it was her nighttime pair.
Now this movie is perfect.
Oh, Jesus. So because Joe has gamed the system and inherited, wink wink, this rent-controlled apartment, his 2 creepy landlords who are portrayed simultaneously as like ne'er-do-well gangsters, but also like maybe developmentally delayed or mentally impaired.
Yes.
It's very poorly and done without any taste.
They're also, I mean, they're like filling in like every single, skeezy jerk landlord type personage. Like every single trope for that is rolled into one for these guys, and it was just like it's just groan inducing, just like the whole movie.
Yes, and
like,
they are related, but central casting goofed because one of them is black and one of them looks like Flea, but he's not Flea. Flea
would have brought a certain level of panache to this film.
Flea would have crushed it. Let's be real. Actually, sidebar. In a previous episode, I think I said that a character in that New Year's Eve movie we watched at B-Fest with the Wet Bandit and the drug dealer from the future. I think I said that this character in that was like a cross between Flea and Donnie from the Wild Thornberrys. And I later learned that Flea was the voice of Donnie on the Wild Thornberrys. So really, the character in that film was just Flea. Basically, all movies are better if they have Flea. Just like, look at The Big Lebowski, for instance.
Categorically cannot deny that. All right, yeah.
We are the nihilists. But anyway, these 2 landlords, they know that they figure out that Joe is not actually the Mr. Joe Grotowski.
Well, they don't. There are 2.
You're right.
They suspect when they hear him talking to Mom on the phone.
Yes, and he covers for this when he hears a knock at his door by saying, great to talk to you, Mom. I love you. Amen. And then hangs up the phone.
Loudly. Like, there's like... Because he's too nervous. It's like... Okay. This is unnecessary.
They collect his rent, and then they are all part of this plot to get him out of there. So they break into his apartment in the middle of the night.
They're trying to do a redevelopment deal, and their boss is trying to do a redevelopment deal. So, the story of every real estate movie in the 90s in New York.
Again, I think there's room to read Joe's apartment as an ill-conceived metaphor for gentrification, but really, that's it falls so short. That'd
be a lot of reading.
I think there's a PhD somewhere who could do it, an aspiring doctoral candidate. But anyway,
couple hundred pages and several doses of insanity.
I think I could write a book about how this film is actually about social class warfare.
I think it's really Plato's cave in...
The shadows on the wall are the cockroaches.
Yes, I was about to say that.
And then you emerge into the sunlight and you realize, I live in a shithole. It totally works. So they break into Joe's apartment. Well, I guess they let themselves in, but they make it look like a break-in. And this is literally a 2-bedroom apartment. There's a living room.
This scene is so delightful.
A living room with the couch where Joe sleeps. a
and
small
he's asleep
bathroom.
there right
Yes.
then.
After the roaches tuck him in, mind you, which is maybe one of the creepier scenes. All through stop motion, this blanket just creeps up his torso. They're like, we gotta protect Joe. Then there's the kitchen and his little table in the kitchen, and for some reason, they walk right through the living room where Joe is clearly asleep on the couch, and they're destroying the kitchen.
Yeah.
And at one point, there's a shot of a camera from inside the cupboard, and one of the landlords is like, "Where is he?"
And they're both staring into the cupboard. I was like, "Wait, do they think he's there?" I don't. It's very clearly. Only a man of Lilliputian size could be in there. I don't understand.
Oh my god, they're looking for. They thought Joe was actually a borrower. It's so.
That makes
so
a lot more
stupid.
sense.
But when the roaches realized what is afoot,
they saw him from like 2 blocks away when they were walking to the building, and they don't understand perspective, and so they thought
he's a little guy, isn't he?
He's much smaller now. I don't.
But the roaches, not Joe, the roaches figure out what is going on. So they, through a series of Home Alone parody traps, they get these 2 landlords on their backs and threaten to eat or like they say, if you don't leave our friend Joe alone, you'll never eat a meal in this city without having a cockroach in it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that puts the fear of God in these 2. So they
they also have like a submachine gun and a handgun and unload trying to kill the roaches.
Oh God, you're right.
And then and he basically gets an expanded apartment then because they blew out a hole for him.
They see the cockroaches when the cockroaches are starting to make their move, and they decide the best way to handle this is to shoot thousands of bullets at them. And meanwhile, like, I don't know if we mentioned this, but there's maybe 30,000 roaches in this apartment. That's what they tell Joe anyway. There's probably more. If there's one cockroach, there's probably more. If there's 30,000 cockroaches. But then we later learn that Joe is on the bus and he's driving, looking out the window.
This drove me nuts too. Like,
and
he's on the bus and just regular music is playing, and then he looks out the window and it's like they're passing an alleyway and he sees the love interest of this story, this blonde-haired, was she blue-eyed? I don't know, girl.
She's blonde for sure.
Tending a garden that she's made
in the middle of an alleyway behind the 911 dispatcher's office.
So like 0.2 seconds of time.
He falls in love.
Yeah, he falls in love. Time goes to slow motion. This uplifting music plays, and I was just like, "What?"
It's so bizarre.
What? She was like behind a bush pruning stuff. What's happening
and I think,
right now?
If I remember correctly, this is at one of the many points in the movie where Joe's having a Charlie Brown moment because he can't find a job.
Yeah.
But
I think that was after when the roaches were like, "We gotta help him find a job," and then roaches just following him in everything he does.
Joe finds all of these minimum wage entry level jobs, like delivering pizzas, and
there were 700 roaches on the pizza.
He delivers a pizza, and roaches pour out. There's another thing. I think he's like washing dishes, and that doesn't work out.
Basically, he's the Edgar suit roach guy from Men in Black. That's what he's walking around as.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just roaches spilling out of everything.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And kind of convincing stop motion, though, I will say, for those little clips.
I think that's why it was so gross. Just like,
yes, because it feels like you're watching a bunch of roaches on a pizza.
Though I think for that, they probably just like chuck some roaches in there. Like, they'll be happy, it'll be fine. Then they threw the box of pizza with roaches at people.
Yeah, probably. This
was probably not a fun movie to shoot.
I don't know. What's his name? Joe is played by Jerry O'Connell, who's had I think he missed a shot in movies by starting in Joe's Apartment, but he did have a very long career on television with like Crossing Jordan, where he plays like, he basically always plays like the good guy, handsome boy. He plays the Ohio boy.
The
Ohio, Iowa boy who probably lives in Indiana and solves crimes and maybe has like a heart of gold or something. That's basically his whole career. But he sees a blonde woman. What's her name? Lily. That's right.
Yes.
Lily. She's named after a flower. And because
I
flowers
didn't
are
even
her
make
life.
that connection right now, but
Yeah. Yeah, I know. But she works as a 911 dispatcher where, again, they're completely incompetent. And rather than sending ambulances to anyone, they just put people on hold until they hang up. And for some reason, this is portrayed as a very stressful job.
she's like, I wish we could help people more than put them on hold. And it was like, what?
And then there's like a scene where the clock gets to 10:02, and then Peppa's character is like, coffee break, and literally everyone in the entire office just gets up and leaves.
You know what? I think Mr. Payson had some terrible experiences with the bureaucracy in New York and then decided to revisit them thoroughly.
Yes, before he made it as a film director with Joe's Apartment, he had all of the worst jobs New York City had to offer. And probably all the cockroaches, too. Let's be real. Then Joe's like, I fell in love. And at this point, the roaches reveal themselves to Joe because he almost eats them in his cereal. In a scene where he like literally puts a spoonful of cereal plus 2 roaches inside his mouth, doesn't chew.
And they start talking to him
because they're like,
his
oh
mouth.
my God, I think we're going in. And he pulls them out. He's like, what? And they're like, hey, Joe, we like having you around. Because you're real.
You make so much garbage. We love it.
Man, you're a real messy person. We love that. Garbage, yeah. And he is like, okay, but you got to stop following me to work and other stuff. And then this is when he joins the band, and maybe Andy's favorite scene in the whole movie, where he's putting up posters that just say shit. Advertising the band.
Yeah, he's advertising the band on one wall, and it's just, he's like, the entire wall. Like, he's put up hundreds of these on one wall. He's about to finish his wall. He meets up with, what do you know, but Lily.
And she's papering her wall with posters for the community garden, which coincidentally is the same block where Joe currently lives.
Now, I do want to say, I don't recall her poster having any text on it.
It was literally just flowers, I think.
Just flowers.
Yeah.
So it's not a very effective advertisement.
I think in the the set design, art department, whatever, they were like, well, we have just the one poster that has one big word, so maybe on the other poster we can't have any words. And they're like, yes, art. Okay, let's do it.
Yes, and so the lines have like perfect. So here's the other part about this. I was just like, all of this makes no sense. So he's obviously done his entire wall in rows across the whole thing to have the corners.
And how he would get to the corner without noticing that there's another person
also doing the same thing, and she's also gotten to the corners before. So they meet when they're both finishing up, and it says so. The scene cuts to like him, like he's saying he's interested in her, and like he asked her to like come see his thing, the band or whatever.
He invites her to see his band perform,
and then they show a shot of like them holding hands or something.
They shake hands.
They shake hands. Okay, they shake hands, and it's right down the line, the middle line, as they they shake hands, is shit on the left and flowers on the right. And I was like, some art student or Mr. Payson was real proud of that shot right there. Like, symbolism, guys.
It's so heavy-handed, and the takeaway is just there's like, really, this is what you thought was subtlety. But then we learn that Lily's father is a senator in New York, and he is working with the 2 landlords to kill all of the tenants in Joe's building because it is the last building on the block where he plans to build the largest supermax prison in the world or something.
Yeah.
And
like
Joe's the last holdout, preventing them from making all this money. But before we learn any of this, before we even know this man is a senator in the United States government, we are shown a shot of him looking out the window in his office, at which point he just unbuttons the top of his shirt, where you see a red lacy brassiere
satin thing with black lace.
And he touches it in a way, like, it made me think he has never actually touched a woman's breasts before, because he was, like, touching his sternum. Like, it was, like, massaging his sternum. And then the two landlords and their, like, crime boss walk in, and he's like, oh, yes, hello, let me button up. And, so, he's a cross-dresser, and that plot doesn't go anywhere. Except for
he just is, and they showed it to us, and it's just
except for
like
at the end of the film,
jokes.
it comes back when he raises his arm in triumph when he's become the hero and is wearing a leather choker bracelet on his wrist.
Yeah.
And
really, it's just, I just like Evan and I think we both looked at each other just like, why?
It doesn't make any sense. And then there is one other time it comes up when he's having lunch with his daughter Lily, and he's obsessed with her earrings for some reason. And as Andy pointed out, this man's ears are not even pierced. So, like, what's he gonna do? Buy these earrings and lick them? Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, before Joe plays the show with shit. Like, he plays shit for shit. He gets a job with P.I. Smith & Sons urinal cakes, which
also another subplot. Why?
Another subplot. This is the aforementioned urinal cake subplot, bemoaned by the beloved Roger Ebert, in which Joe is given his mother hooks him up with a job at this place that's literally abbreviated to P.I.S. P.I. Smith and Sons.
That was not lost on me, and I did not laugh at it.
He goes to this interview, and this guy looks like Colonel Sanders in his after photo, like before or like after he ate too many buckets of original recipe. You know, before when he didn't have to be on TV.
I seem to recall him like that was like he's a semi-famous dude. Like I remember I saw that guy and I was like, I've seen him in a bunch of other things.
I didn't recognize him. What I took away most from the scene is he's interviewing Joe, and Joe's suit, meanwhile, is stained in periwinkle paint because Walter Schitt made him part of an art installation in which he dumped paint all over Joe, and that's art.
Yeah. Okay, no, that was David. That was David Huddleston. He was in The Big Lebowski. He was in Blazing Saddles. He's in the like he's great. He's great, and he was in this.
I mean, he crushes it for his little bit in this film. This is our second Big Lebowski reference in this episode, so let's try and get to 3. But organically, you're out of your element, Donnie. Damn it.
It's strange though that his known for does not include on IMDb. The known for list does not include Joe's apartment. I don't know why they're
maybe
he
had a call with the people at Wikipedia, and he was like, "Listen, there's this movie, Joe's Apartment, and in that movie, my longest scene is where I'm interviewing a young man for a job, and while doing so, I ask if his mother still does her hair in that sexy way." Or if she still has the same curves she had in high school. And it's the most awkward Me Too moment ever.
I lick my lips, and it's really horrifying.
And every time Joe answers, this man licks his lips, and it's like, does he want to eat Mrs. Joe, Iowa? Like,
I had almost like forgotten that he did that, so thank you for putting that back in my head.
This Huddleston individual, he has a lot to... He's really chewing the scenery, as they say. But then they're working on the community garden outside Joe's building. Joe leaves his apartment in his yellow, piss-colored jumpsuit to go to his first day on the job. And who does he see but Lily? And he...
because she started the community garden in his area.
Yes.
In that big park area. She's like, I'm going to get support, and Dad, you'll see. You won't develop it. I'll get the people behind it.
By the time my 30-day garden permit is up, I'll have turned this around. And as your wife pointed out, she was like, what? She plans to grow an entire garden in 30 days? And then you and I got to say, it actually happens overnight. But we did skip a very crucial part, and that is where before Joe gets a job, he is running around all over the city with a big shopping bag from a place called Saks, and he's literally filling it with shit. Like dog shit.
Oh, because he wants to help Lily out because
Lily mentioned when they met that she's like, when I saw your poster, I said that's what we need, and he takes this at face value. And he goes all over the city on an odyssey of shit collecting.
And he's traveling on the bus with said bag
with a huge enormous bag of shit, and
Like,
then
he didn't even tie it off. It's just coming on the top of the bag, and his face is right in front of it.
And I did sort of like that because the implication is Joe is so accustomed to living in shit that he can no longer smell it.
Yeah.
But he's following us behind a circus at one point. He puts elephant shit, dog shit, horse shit from like horse-drawn carriages. And he at one point
the carriage is like snagging.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, boy.
Yeah, and then he's on his way home, and he goes past the same alleyway where Lily is tending flowers, but he sees her hugging a man in a suit, and he thinks, oh no, she's married.
And his face, their heads, that when they're hugging, their heads are blocked by a hanging plant. So you can't see who it is, but Joe, being the idiot Ohioan, just makes the assumption that she's taken.
Now,
is very sad about everything.
I do object to you conflating Iowa and Ohio, because I lived in Ohio for a number of years, and I would still like, it's not great, but I'd put it above Iowa and also above Indiana. So
how far above Alabama is that?
I've never been, but roll tide. I think that's what they say. It's a sports thing, football.
They do.
But it's not a reference to red tide, which is a real environmental issue. But
can we talk about the environment?
That would be so much better. You know what? We will talk about the environment, because Joe leaves this bag of shit in his apartment for so long that apparently there were flower seeds in the elephant shit, and these gorgeous purpley blue flowers show up on top. And so he plucks these out and presents them to Lily for her garden when he meets her outside. And she like reaches into his bag, which is full of used urinal cakes. And she's like, can we use these as fertilizer? And he's like, yeah, these'll get your garden growing in no time. And
they're like definitely used, because he'd been sent to gather the entire stadium's worth of urinal cakes. And
yes, he was sent to Yankee Stadium to collect all of the urinals cakes there for further study, so they can perfect the urinal cake. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
How much pee impacts urinal cake? I was like, what research are you doing?
It's the worst. All of this, like, she's touching these urinal cakes with her bare hands, and I wanted to die. It's so upsetting.
And he doesn't say anything.
No, he does not stop her. He could have just said, "Oh, that's for my job. Please don't touch that." And he just is like, "Yeah, put these all over your garden."
Well, so he's wearing the jumpsuit, and she's like, "Oh, what do you?" He's like, she's like, "What do you do for a job then?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm a banker."
And then he says like, PIS&S stands for Private Investments, Stocks, and Secrets or something like that. Stocks and securities. That's it.
And then comes that really weird when he's like, that's when he like really, he's like, you have to go on a date with me or something. And he's like, it's like really weird and forceful, and that's a definite Me Too thing.
It's
like, he was like, well, you have to go with me.
If I give you these urinal cakes, you have to go on a date with me, I think is what he says.
It's so weird and gross.
Like, never have urinal cakes been used for this sort of romantic bargaining. Although there is a gross scene with urinal cakes in the American Psycho novel. I don't know if it's in the movie, but it's equally gross. So, yeah. In that one, the serial killer main character gives his girlfriend a chocolate-covered urinal cake as a treat, and she bites into it and says, "It's so minty. It's so minty." And that's really the whole scene.
That wasn't nearly as bad as I
Thank
was
you.
expecting when you said it was worse.
This has been Evan Recaps Gross Scenes from Famous Novels. A podcast within a podcast, and probably the only episode. But
no, it's a thing. It's a thing.
It's our new segment. So Joe goes to his job to deliver, I guess, 0 urinal cakes because he gave them all to Lily, and it turns out,
what are you even doing with that? I don't. It doesn't matter. I forgot.
It doesn't matter because he shows up, and PIS&S has been bought out by a ladies. You're given to understand they make like women's menstruation products.
Yes, and my favorite part of that whole thing is that they didn't like kick him out. they wheeled him out in his chair. Like, I don't know if he
Not
was
Joe.
like,
They wheeled out Mr. Piss.
Mr. Piss. They did wheel him out in his chair,
And
and they're
they
like,
let
"This is
him
how you
take
leave."
the giant, like, life-size urinal cake that he used to decorate his office.
Not life size, human size. It's like 6 feet, 7 feet tall.
Enormous.
Yeah,
And
it's not
apparently a
urinal
fully
cake, it's
functional urinal cake.
Yeah, no, it's definitely plastic. But apparently, for the sake of movie magic, it's a real urinal cake that also has magical properties.
Yeah.
Which we find out about later.
Yes, but Lily goes to the shit show. I just put that together. It was a shit show. And Joe starts drumming, and everyone realizes he can't drum, or he starts not drumming.
Mr. Shit goes, and now we got the sickest drummer, or something like that. And the lights go onto Joe, and he's like, all right.
As if every rock show in the history of music has started with a fucking drum solo. It was so stupid.
Yeah, and then Walter was, I really don't understand. Like, this was another piece of art for him.
Yeah, like, he seems genuinely pissed off that Joe can't play the drums, whereas I thought the whole point of his band was, like, they just got up there with instruments that they couldn't play and made noise. But no, he's legitimately upset that Joe can't play the drums.
I was like, there was no line. He was like, oh, I can't do this. So that's perfect. It's like, okay.
And then Joe leaves the stage. Lily feels sad for him, so she follows him. Then she mistakenly goes back to his apartment, and Joe has had a talk with the Roaches to say, like, hey, man, you guys got to keep a low profile while my date is here. But they're returning to Joe's apartment, and we see the Roaches singing the lovely song "Funky Towel."
Well, they get splashed by a car. And
oh God, that's
as they drive, and he's like, "Oh, I've got a towel," and then it cuts right then to the towel in question, and it is and there might as well be maggots growing in it. Like,
it was a gray towel, but you can tell it started out as blue, and it's this awful towel. There's roaches dancing on it. They are dancing in a kick line, and it falls off the towel rack, and part of it falls into the toilet, which is the dirtiest toilet I've ever seen in fiction or real life.
Swimming in there, and they're having a grand old time.
And no one wrings out the towel before he gives it to the girl. And
he doesn't give her that towel. He gives her a paper towel.
Oh, that's right. Okay, but the towel is still. It's never dealt with. It's like Chekhov's towel that never is cleaned.
There's a reason the building was burned down. Like, no one, all the props were horrified, and they just had to be done with it.
That towel was method acting, and it was really that disgusting. And so John Pace was like, I think we need to burn down the set. Everyone's tired of the towel smell.
I shouldn't have written it in, and I'm sorry.
I regret so many things, but especially funky towel. But then the Roaches are like watching this date progress. Joe's putting the moves on Lily on his gross couch, and they're in.
Yeah, like she's like willing to sit, and there's literally like pizza slices and cracked thrown like bowls that are broken and on the floor, and it's like there are constant shots of how ugly and terrible this place is, and she's like so enraptured by him.
She thinks, I'm so turned on. She's like, am I wet or was I like splashed by a bus? Mom, skip this part. Okay. Then
so
it was extremely gross. I regret so many things.
We'll fix it in post.
I don't know. Anyway, okay. Palate cleanser.
That felt like something I might have said.
It really did, you know? I'm going to say I was possessed, perhaps. But they're on the couch doing their dating thing where the Roaches are watching from a hanging overhead light.
Yeah,
and because they're
somehow their mass is so enough that they can, and they're like so eager. I don't know if they're like shifting back and forth on their nervous little feet, and it's like a swing, and like neither of them notice that the lamp above them is whipping around wildly at this point. And the roach is like, I gotta jump, I gotta go in there.
And they literally jump directly onto Lily's breasts.
Yeah. Just down her shirt, and she's screaming. And I think that was real screams of disgust.
I think John Payson was like, we're method acting. Dump a whole bunch of fucking real roaches on her.
He's like, I saw birds. They did real birds. We're doing real roaches.
He's like, this is my Hitchcockian moment.
Bring it on.
But then, so she runs out, obviously terrified.
And it's strange to me that she didn't roll down the stairs, but I think
she is, I think, the only character who does not in the film. Joe tries to follow her outside, but he's yelling at the roaches. But then when Lily gets outside, she realizes that someone has set fire to all of the hard work she did in the park.
But like my part was like, I would still be real messed up about the roaches down my shirt. Like,
yes,
I would not.
That
be,
is
like,
still
okay.
more traumatizing than the community garden you worked on for literally one day has been burned.
Oh man, a couple hours of work. By the way, do you remember the feeling of 1,000 legs on your body?
I do vividly. Then Joe yells at the roaches, and he goes Rambo mode and tries to kill them.
This was funny. That was kind of funny.
It was pretty funny. He's wearing bandoliers of smoke grenades.
Yeah.
And
they and the roach is like, well, I guess this means war.
Yeah, they tie him down in a classic Gulliver's Travels Lilliputian thing. Yeah. And they threaten to light him on fire basically by starting a match in front of this stuff called Roach Nuke or something. It's like a aerosol can. Yeah, they're threatening him because they're sentient roaches, and it's like, well, Joe, you know our secret. We can't let you. You've
live.
seen our
Forget
Roach Public Access TV channel.
Oh yeah. There's a whole Roach economy. They can read. They can write. They
have pornography.
It is horrifying. There's a whole subsystem. It's the worst.
It's terrible. Then the landlords, because yes, they are who set fire to the community garden, they quickly start setting fire to Joe's building. Joe is tied down to his floor. The roaches flee, but Joe manages to free himself because he was tied down with used dental floss, which isn't gross at all. And he barely escapes and sort of passes out outside in the now burnt hellscape that was the community garden.
Don't the bad guys rolled down the stairs, the landlords rolled down the stairs after their shooting spree, I forgot. Okay.
Yes. Well, we missed that, but yes.
Down. Yeah.
After the roaches scare them and bully them. But then Joe wanders outside, he falls asleep, and the roaches are like, oh, I think we really messed up, Joe. We gotta do everything we can to help him. And so they go on an all-night frenzy?
Hold on, I've written down the steps that occurred because this is. Oh my god, we forgot the part where there's a roach rodeo. They get chased by the cat, and they wrestle the cat. And
I don't think we need to recap the songs, or at least not all of them. But there is a cat, and they sing a song called "Cat Rodeo." And
the roaches throughout the time they were living with Joe, the roaches were getting mail. Their public access TV was solid.
That was maybe one of the funnier jokes in the whole movie. Was their public access cable channel? Are you pulling up those notes?
Yeah. So then I've got up to where we're at now with them. They're getting the deed for the land, and they're doing a bunch of forgeries. And I was just thinking of. I
don't know, dude. You haven't said it yet.
You're the worst.
I'm really glad we paused the podcast so you could find these killer notes. I'm loving the jokes you have. This is great material. This is fucking amazing radio, dude.
I'm just remembering the line where he goes, they're penetrating the bureaucracy. That is what they do. They penetrate the bureaucracy. They get in. They change the deed over to Joe. They change everything. They're crawling through all of New York's circuitous systems, and they're establishing that they can also do waterworks, they go ahead and grab the giant rolling urinal cake, and that when they drop it in the swamp water that is in this burnt out husk of an area, it turns the water clean and pure, which I didn't know urinal cakes did.
Well, we also don't know what was in that water. Let's be fair.
They also resawed the whole park.
Yes.
What is now turning into a park. They built a gazebo. Like, the roaches, I don't know why a human exists at all right now.
You can't say they are not industrious. And Ira Glass, if you're out there, Andy Gerassi's fucking coming for you, buddy. American
Roaches.
Public, This American Roach.
This American Life? This American Roach. This American Roach. You know, was This American Life around back then? Because that would have been the best.
It's
a
been
Roach's
around
Tale.
Forever.
In 3 parts.
Act 1.
The first part.
A urinal cake. So yeah, that all happens overnight. Lily arrives and finds...
They make the most beautiful park, and Lily finds Joe asleep in the middle of it with the deed to the thing in his hands.
And then he gives it to Lily because it's her park now, and then her dad arrives and he's like, oh, you were right, this park's pretty dope. And then the crime boss shows up with the 2 landlords, and he's like, kill all these people. Well, he's like, kill him, kill the senator. You see that, and kill his daughter. You see that guy standing next to him? Kill him too. You see that fat lady? Kill her. And he's telling them to kill everyone in the whole park. And they're like, yeah, okay, yeah. And then the roaches show up again and move the manhole cover they are all conveniently standing on, and they fall presumably to their deaths. So then Joe, because he is effectively homeless, he just moves into Lily's house with her senator father. They're making out. He's taking a bath. Rodney Roach shows up in a little toy boat. And then there's like a makeout scene, and the Roaches sing the aforementioned Hold My Feeler, where they transform Lily's like jewelry into a church. And they have like a wedding.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's chorus lines. They're all like priestly outfits and like a church choir, and they have an organ of her makeup they arrange. Like it turned into make it look like an organ. Like it's insane.
Yes,
it's insane. It's a fever dream.
But this did have my one genuine laugh, which was when a roach using bobby pins as crutches walks down the aisle of the church, and the roach priest miraculously heals them. I enjoyed that immensely, I have to say. Really, and then, thankfully, after 79 awful, terrible minutes, the film finally ends. So yeah, that's Joe's apartment. Welcome to Joe's apartment.
So I do want to say the film that I was referencing was The Incredibles. So we're just going to call this a callback to that excellent joke I made earlier.
Yep, This American Roach.
It's coming to a close.
That other podcast within a podcast that Andy was super prepared for and went really well.
Thank you, Evan.
I don't even remember like what you were referencing in The Incredibles, which is a film you and I both love. But you know what? We'll get to that later.
We will?
I'll give you my notes. I'll give you my notes on your performance tonight.
We'll cover it again
some other time. But you know how I'm feeling. Feeling financial.
Okay.
You can find us online.
I swear to God, if some sponsor is Roaches today, we're done.
No. We have a more. The sponsorships have upped their production values. So we have the sponsor recorded their own little ad, and they sent it to us, and I'm just gonna include it in our show in post. I'll literally fix it in post.
Yes, for real.
Hey, my name is Percival Charles Winthrop III, on my mother's side. Have you ever wanted to go on a tour of the haunted places in and around Savannah, Georgia? Maybe visit an actual peach orchard and try out some peach ice cream? Look no further than the Georgia Peach Touring Company. Book your trip today at georgiapeachtours.com. All you'll need is a credit card number, social security number, your mother's maiden name, and the street you lived on as a child. That's georgiapeachtours.com. Thank you kindly. I should mention that when I asked the sponsor whether or not they wanted to do a coupon code, they said no, but what is your bank PIN? So I didn't answer, so there's no coupon code, but, it's fine. But you can find us on badwatchpod.com, buy some of our sweet, sweet merch, and find links to our stuff on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. This is where I'll put in the sponsor clip. Now, Andy. Good watch.
Oh, do we do that thing?
Now, normally, listeners, before we start recording, or at least before you start listening to what we have recorded, I prompt Andy that Good Watch is a recurring segment within this podcast of which he is co-host, and remind him that while we are discussing the bad movie we watch, he needs to think of a good thing that he also watched. So I'm going to let him do that now while I tell you about a film.
No.
Oh.
No. I'm going first because I am prepared.
Okay.
I've planned. I worked. I slaved over this.
Just like you prepared for This American Roach, the podcast within a podcast.
You know nothing. You know nothing, Jon Snow. You know nothing, John Roach. My good watch for this week's episode is Love, Death, and Robots. Which is on Netflix, and it's sort of it's a series of vignettes. They're not really connected, but there's a whole bunch of really cool animation styles and just cool little storylines to watch. I really enjoyed it. It sort of had an animatrix feel for anyone who has seen that before.
Nice.
And it was really, really cool. I really enjoyed it. I actually think Evan initially recommended it to me.
Nope, I haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't?
Nope.
So, all right then.
I have not.
Well, you need to watch it.
I keep seeing it on my Netflix, and it does look quite good. So
it's
I'll have
really
to
cool.
Check it out. The movie that I would like to recommend is also on Netflix, and it is called The Wailing. It is a South Korean film, so if you don't like watching movies with subtitles, or perhaps you can't read, just fast forward for the next bit while I gush about how much I love this movie. It's a horror, supernatural thriller, drama, and there's these mysterious deaths happening in this Korean village where the people there are these murders happening where these people murder everyone in their family, and they're found later in like a stupor covered in this horrendous rash. And the film follows the story of a police officer who's trying to figure out what's going on. And it is definitely scary, but it's also like it's scary like the way The Exorcist is scary. Like there's religious horror, there's body horror, there's horror. There's all the horrors.
Scary horror, comedy horror.
It's so good. But I will say, unless you speak Korean, you do need to watch with subtitles, and it is like 2.5 hours long, so it is not a short time investment. And I watched it over multiple evenings, and honestly, by the last hour and a half, I could not pull myself away. It is so incredible. I can't recommend it highly enough if you're into any sort of scary movie. It's really
I want to
really
quickly.
Cool.
I want to support you wholly in this. I haven't seen it. I did just try and research it as you were discussing it, and
I'm glad you listened to me so closely.
I googled The Wailing as in WHALING and was really confused.
No,
when I was like,
no,
this doesn't match up at all. Vancouver, a killer whale tries to befriend people in Vancouver. Does not sound like a horror movie in Korea.
But it could be. I haven't seen it.
So look up The Wailing, WAILING,
yes.
And don't be like Andy.
See, that's the thing. If Andy had actually listened to me, he would have picked up that there are no whales in this film.
You know what? I didn't know. It might have been lurking under the water.
It's not the whaling. It's the wailing.
If I could, I would mic drop, but this is a nice microphone.
I'm going to just gloss right over that because I hate everything about it. So please follow us online. Again, our website is badwatchpod.com. You can follow me on Twitter or at my website, Evan W. Stoner, and you can follow Andy on his way to work.
Don't do that.
He's Andy.
That guy's Evan.
And this is Badwatch. Do 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 do. Welcome to Joe's apartment.
Oh no.